I was in class 8 in 1990. And the clamor for multipartyism was that time being led mostly by young lawyers, the likes of Paul Mwite, Kiraito Murungi, Mother Njoka, now Mother Karua. And they inspired me because of the fight they had for change, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And on to high school, I think I carried that dream of being a lawyer. And I hoped to be one, but I missed law school by a point. Remember the cluster subjects that we had then? I think we required, if I remember well, I think 42 points. I had 41 points in my cluster subjects for law school. So I missed going to law school. In between, after high school, I happened to have done accounting in high school and did very well in accounting, and I liked the subject. So we had a 2-year lag before we joined public universities then. Remember then, it was basically mostly public universities. So I spent that 1 and almost 3/4 of a year pursuing my CPA at Strathmore College. I actually started off my section 1 at KCA, KCA College. It was then a small college on 3rd floor of Waumini. Is it Waumini House, or the building next to Waumini House in Westlands? But I had struggles commuting from Kikuyu, raising fare alone, and lunch money was difficult. My father didn't believe in educating people beyond high school. So I really struggled to get through college, and I had to change from full-time college to part-time. That's how I moved to Strathmore, because Strathmore then was the only college that had evening classes for CPA. So I moved to the evening classes, basically because it was cheaper, the evening class, than the full-time class, and I could do odd jobs during the day to cater for my fees, and I did that for that 1.5 years until I joined the University of Nairobi in October of 1996. But fortunately, by then I had finished all my coursework for CPA. I had only 2 papers to go, and by the time I was done with my first year, I was already a CPA. I did a diploma in banking, and hoped then that now that I was pursuing a degree in economics and history, I have my CPA, I have a diploma in banking. By the time I was in second year, I'd finished my diploma in banking. I was a CPA, and I was very hopeful that I would make a very good banker. Well, just the desire to make an impact, and a positive one, and be the change that I want to see in my country and around the space where I live and work. It is. It is tough. Yeah. Tough because you are leading politicians, one. The pressures of the job are too much at times. And you have to balance. You have to balance between your family, your businesses. I'm still a businessman. I have businesses to run. Your constituency. The constituency that I'm elected in Kikuyu. The constituency that of members of parliament in our coalition. Because that's also a constituency that I have to manage. And of course, manage expectations of government. You remember you lead government business in the house. And of course, generally politics. And you can see how turbulent our politics is. So balancing between all those things is something that has to keep you on your toes and up almost 24/7. Was I part of the last regime? Well, yeah, I was part of the first regime of the Jubilee administration, 2013, 2017. Beyond 2018, I think we were largely there because we had to be there since we were elected on Jubilee Party tickets. But we were not part of that regime, that I can tell you. And that was the infamous handshake regime that we were not part of. but we played our role as an effective opposition within government, because the handshake distorted the governance structure of our political system. And we got this mongrel that was not known who is government, who is not government, and basically dissipated the institution of the minority opposition party politics in our governance structures. And that led to a lot of losses to the Kenyan people in terms of the stature of the economy today is as a result of that misrule of the handshake regime, and having a system where really nobody had proper oversight of a government. And therefore, we inherited a system of government that was largely dysfunctional, an economy that was down on its knees at the lowest that we could ever get to. And I've had our critics say Mwai Kibaki found an equally dilapidated economy in 2003. But I'll tell you, Moi was a much more responsible leader than Uhuru Kenyatta. At least Moi had an opposition, an active opposition that he allowed to have their say and play their opposition politics and oversight government, and never got to the level of state capture that Uhuru Kenyatta got this country into. And that means when this government came into office, first was to stabilize the economy. And if you ask me how we have done the last few months, I think the economy has been stabilized, because this economy was going to collapse. We were spending close to 70-80 billion shillings in subsidies, unaffordable subsidies, a month. The fuel subsidy was gobbling up about 60 billion shillings a month. The maize subsidy that was done for about 3 weeks, 8 billion shillings with no subsidized maize on the shelves. And you've heard our friends now asking us to reinstate that subsidy. The immediate thing he did was to stop the subsidies because they were not going to be sustainable. They were sinking us into more debt, and that debt was gobbling up our resources in a manner that government would not be in operation today. Well, remember we formulated some of these policies under Jubilee. Something the housing agenda was one of the big four agendas under Uhuru Kenyatta. But unlike the Jubilee administration, where the big four agenda was an agenda that only existed on paper. And I have challenged people to look at when I was the chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee for about 2 years, every report I authored and was adopted by the House pointed that fact, that we were only speaking about the big four agenda, but we were not devoting resources to it. I raised it with the then president and asked him to convene a workshop between chairs of parliamentary committees and cabinet and principal secretaries to get the big four agenda working. He never did. He only did one roundtable meeting with KEPSA, and I think boldly, when I went for that meeting, I said it as it was, and I think he didn't like it, so I was never invited even for another roundtable meeting. And the engagement with the parliamentarians and the executive never ever happened. Therefore, that agenda died off. That agenda was supposed to help the economy grow, so that we are able to repay some of the debts that we had taken up in the first Jubilee administration. And that's why we spoke about the housing agenda that would create jobs and create wealth and or create employment for our people. We spoke about food security would not be in the position that we are in today had we invested as we ought to have invested in food security. We spoke about universal health coverage that was not that was never done. I remember it was just a rollout in the 4 pilot counties. Then state capture checked in. The Ministry of Health was taken over by family cartels. We began trivializing the universal health coverage to building level 3 hospitals around Nairobi at a cost of 70 million shillings for just a structure that cost nothing more than 20 million shillings. Therefore, those agendas were not Uhuru Kenyatta's agendas. They were not Jubilee Party agendas. They were agendas for the country. And you will see in our manifesto, we built on some of those things like universal health coverage. We have really thought through the process and thought of what to do. And you can be certain, and you heard the president speak to it on Labor Day. We have a solid plan on universal health coverage to ensure that Kenyans have a healthcare system that works and that is affordable to them. Because you can only grow an economy if you have a healthy nation and you're not devoting a lot of your resources as a country to treatment of diseases that probably you even have preempted from progressing to the level they will progress at. That's why you see a lot of focus on your primary healthcare under our healthcare plan. The housing agenda. You've seen the number of projects the president has gone around the country rolling out that housing agenda, because it's one of the things that will also feed into the creation of jobs, to feed into the manufacturing agenda, because housing comes with a bit of manufacturing. All the things you are using in the factories will support our cement industry, the concrete items, ballast, sand harvesters, equipment, including furniture. So I'll tell you that our plan has a lot that you will see that was supposed to be there under the Jubilee administration, but was sacrificed at the altar of political expediency under the handshake regime. As you're aware, this process has been ongoing from April 2nd, when the opposition reached out to the president and asked the president to give them a way out of the demonstrations. And looking at the issues that they were raising, from the reinstatement of the Cherera 4, opening of servers, the cost of living, and reconstitution of the IBC panel, the president magnanimously agreed with them that some of the things they were asking for were achievable, and indeed he could be able to bend backwards and accommodate them within the constitutional and legal framework that we have. That's why I said the matter of the cost of living is more administrative work of any government, and that government has its own plan that is working on. That's radically different from what the opposition was proposing, because they wanted a perpetuation of the corruption-ridden subsidies, which we are not going to engage in. Probably continue feeding the state capture a lot that was there before. And therefore, the Cherera 4 was not something you could do legally. The opening of the servers, again, legally, there was nothing for the president to do. And that's why he told them we can establish a bipartisan process to reconstitute the IBC panel. And you saw the demands that came thereafter. Bipartisan, by the way, didn't mean Azimio Kenya Kwanza. Our understanding that it is all parties. That is why it's bipartisan. And when Jubilee was left out on the other side, we accommodated them. And our friends used that as an excuse to go back on what they had committed to. Fortunately, reason has prevailed over them. Largely, from what I've been able to read, it is not actually the people you see speaking. It is the people who speak behind them. And by that I mean the sponsor is a problem in this. And that is why you saw even the former Prime Minister, when he agreed on April 2nd, on 3rd, he changed tune. Probably, most likely after speaking to the sponsor. And so we hear the sponsor was not happy. And that's why he called for the national accord kind of engagement. to what has now metamorphosized into extra parliamentary process, which we are still engaged. So we have been speaking to our colleagues and asking them to put country before the other interests, because people are pushing for their own interests. The cost of living agenda was never an agenda on the table. That is why you heard Jeremiah Kioni the other day saying, hata mkipunguza bei ya unga, bado tutaendelea na maandamano, because the cost of living was never the issue for them. The issue was their own selfish ends and the selfish desires of their sponsors. And many of our colleagues, even in the opposition, do agree that some of the demands they have on the table are not tenable. And therefore, I think they've also been pushing from their end that we allow reason to prevail. And many of them also realize that they are hurting their own political and personal images, even with the international community, with these very violent demonstrations that were causing wanton destruction to lives and property of Kenyans. And it was working against them. So eventually the stalemate boiled down to the reconstitution of the committee or recusal or removal of Kainan and the Honorable Kosing. And over the weekend, I can tell you we did engage with a number of them. And by Monday evening, we asked them, since last time we went fast and you shifted goalposts, this time we have said we will not engage. You are demanding to have violent protests at the same time with talks on the table. And we told them clearly, we shall not engage in two parallel processes. We shall have only one process. Either you're on the table or you're in the streets. In the streets, we have no business in the streets. You deal with those people who deal with people in the streets. On the table, we will engage with you. But you have to call off the demonstration. And I think we put our foot down, you call off the demonstration, we are ready to recuse the Honorable Kainan. And we engaged with the Honorable Kainan from as early as Friday last week and the bipartisan committee. And the Honorable Kainan was so gracious, he said he would not want to be the hindrance to this process. So we told them, we are ready, so long as we are ready to call off the demonstrations. With a change in leadership, it has a chance of surviving. But if you want to trust Uhuru Kenyatta to lead a political party, Uhuru Kenyatta has never led any political party. He has no history of managing or running any political party. Remember, Uhuru Kenyatta inherited KANU. That was a national movement with huge number of members of parliament. When Moi left Uhuru Kenyatta with KANU, he left KANU with, I think, less than 15 members of parliament. Beyond that, it was TNA. TNA was rescued by merging with the URP to Jubilee, and I can tell you for free, the formation of Jubilee was the work single-handedly of William Ruto. We had numerous breakfast meetings in Karen. William Ruto convincing those who never believed in the dissolution of political parties to form one national party. Uhuru Kenyatta played no role at all. And you can look for him and ask him how many meetings he held with anybody to convince them to wind up their parties. It was William Ruto who was doing that work. It is William Ruto who met with members of parliament and convinced them over like 3 breakfast meetings that this is the right way to go, to have one united national party other than having ethnic and personality-based parties. Therefore, when Uhuru Kenyatta chased us away from Jubilee, we opted to form another party. And we did. And we had about 176 members of parliament under Jubilee. Today, Jubilee is a pale shadow of its own self with less than 30 members of parliament. Therefore, if you expect Uhuru Kenyatta to continue running that party and remain as a party, you are dreaming. It would come back here with less than 2 members of parliament, if they were lucky. Therefore, I congratulate Honorable Sabina Chege. I say it is poetic justice that the people Uhuru Kenyatta used to chase us away from Jubilee have now used the same structures he used to chase him away from the same party. Poetic justice. And it serves him right.